Good evening, football fans. Welcome back to Between the Tackles. I am your host, Dominic Minicozy, and in tonight's episode, I'm going to show you why the Carolina Panthers should make the playoffs next season. Let's get started. So, in order to keep myself busy and satiate my hunger for football in the offseason, I go back and I rewatch a lot of the NFL games from the previous year. And over the past few weeks, I have seen every single game that the Carolina Panthers played last season. Now, to say that this team was fun to watch is perhaps an understatement, because despite having every reason to throw in the towel and essentially tank last season, they fought in every single game they played. The most obvious example of this is their game against the Kansas City Chiefs, where, very ironically I should add, in Chiefs-type fashion, they came back and nearly won the game, losing by a very small margin of 33-31. They had several games like this throughout the season, where they nearly beat teams like the Raiders and the Saints in absolute shootouts where they had no business even being in that game. Watching games like these truly make me believe that the Carolina Panthers are going to be a playoff team next year. Now, I already know what you're thinking right now. Dom, you're an idiot.
You're an idiot!
You have horrible sports takes. I mean, you really sound like Flight Reacts and Max Kellerman combined right now.
Iguodala.
But listen, I hope I can change your mind with this video. So now I present to you 3 reasons why Carolina should make the playoffs next year. Reason number 1, this coaching staff is legit. As a Philadelphia/Delaware County native, I am a big fan of Matt Rhule. A big fan, specifically because of what he was able to accomplish at Temple University. Now, he took Temple from a record of, I believe, 4-7 in the year 2012 to back-to-back 10-win seasons in 2015 and 2016. That was only 4 years since he became the head coach with that team. Then, after his final season with Temple in 2016, he went on to become the head coach of Baylor University. Now, they also weren't a very good football team. As a matter of fact, the team that posted a 1-11 record in Matt Rhule's first year there. However, in just 3 years with Baylor, he posted an 11-win season and took them to the Sugar Bowl. So clearly when it comes to Matt Rhule's success as a head coach, there's one common denominator, and that's Matt Rhule himself. But that's not to say that he doesn't have great staff around him. For example, his offensive coordinator in Carolina last year, Joe Brady, was interviewed for multiple head coaching jobs in the offseason, despite only having 1 year as an offensive coordinator in the NFL. And that's pretty impressive considering that the Carolina Panthers were 5-11 last year, and that there were plenty of other established offensive coordinators on the market, like Brian Daboll and Eric Bieniemy. Overall, as far as coaching staff is concerned, I believe Carolina is in really good hands. This leads me to reason number 2. This roster is only getting better. The Carolina Panthers are full of young and improving talent. Great players that come to mind on the defensive side of the ball are Jeremy Chin, who's been an absolute stud at safety. He's a tackle machine, and he gets it done, and also he scores the ball quite a bit too. Derek Brown is a really solid defensive tackle. There's no doubt that he could start in the NFL, and he's a great man in the middle to have. Not to mention you have their team sack leader last year, Brian Burns, who generates really solid pass rush off the edge. So you have those foundational blocks, guys that could be potential stars on this defense. And then you also have role players, guys like middle linebacker Shaq Thompson, who played alongside Luke Kuechly. Dante Jackson, one of their starting corners, who played really well in a few games. I actually remember off the top of my head an interception that he had against Justin Herbert that he literally almost took to the house. So even though their defense didn't play well last year, they have foundational pieces that can certainly improve and are still on this roster. Then you get to the offense, which was a highlight of this team last year. You had an outstanding receiving core consisting of Robbie Anderson, DJ Moore, and Curtis Samuel. Now, Curtis Samuel will most likely be a free agent going into this offseason, provided that Carolina does not franchise tag him, but you still have a solid receiver duo, and both of them posted over 1,000 yards receiving last year. Then you look at their backfield. They got the Swiss Army knife of running backs, Christian McCaffrey. He's arguably the most versatile back in football. He can catch passes out of the backfield, he can run between the tackles, no pun intended, and he can essentially do whatever you ask him to do at the running back position. Then you look at their quarterback situation. I understand Teddy Bridgewater isn't the best quarterback in the NFL, but he can certainly win you football games. He had a lot of outstanding plays last year. I believe he's tied for 4th or 5th place in the NFL last year for passes over 40 plus yards. So he can air the ball out downfield. He's not a turnover machine. He's not going to fumble the ball or throw a lot of interceptions in a football game. And he has a pretty solid record as a starter, especially if you exclude this season, which I believe is fair considering the circumstances. But if you're not happy with Teddy Bridgewater as the quarterback, and let's say he doesn't play that well, I believe with the 8th overall pick, the Carolina Panthers are going to get somebody like Justin Fields or Trey Lance and develop them behind Teddy Bridgewater. Also, it's important to add that they are in the Deshaun Watson sweepstakes, but I doubt that they're going to be able to get him, considering that Miami and New York just both have more picks, and I don't think Deshaun Watson necessarily wants to go to Carolina. Now, they obviously can improve on the O-line. They do have a really solid center. That's Matt Paradise. And then you also have a really good left tackle, Taylor Moton, who's going to be a free agent, but I anticipate that Carolina will sign him back, considering he's just been such a heavy contributor on this football team, and they don't really have a lot of depth at those positions yet. Now, they're walking into this offseason with $30+ million in cap, and that's after the cap's been adjusted. So they have enough money to get a starting offensive lineman. They have enough money to get somebody to help out on defense. So they clearly can fix any holes or patch up any problems with their team there. But they also have the draft. You have the 8th overall pick, the 39th overall pick. They will get immediate contributors to this team in the draft this upcoming season. Their picks are just high enough. This leads me to my third and final reason. Favorable matchups. Football is a game of matchups, and if you look at their 2021 schedule, you can definitely see them winning at least 9 or 10 games next season. But before I go on about their 2021 schedule, I want to mention a few things from last year. First of all, the NFC is way less competitive than the AFC is. If the Chicago Bears could make the playoffs last year and they were the most inconsistent team in football, then certainly the Carolina Panthers can do the same. Also, their schedule last year was significantly harder, and a lot of the games that Carolina lost last year could have been decided by 1 or 2 plays. So, in order to show you what I'm talking about as far as their 2021 schedule is concerned, I've organized this graphic into wins, losses, and 50% games. Now, to show you an example of what I'm talking about, I'm going to use their I'm going to use their 3 divisional games because the format just works out perfectly. I put an L next to both of their games against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers because I believe that they will most likely lose both of those games. I put 50s next to their games against the New Orleans Saints because I believe that they will split even with the Saints. So I believe they will get 1 win against the Saints and 1 loss against the Saints. Then I put W's next to their games against the Atlanta Falcons. That means that I think they most likely will and should beat the Atlanta Falcons. So now I will continue to go through the rest of this schedule. I have them 50-50 with the Washington football team. I really wanted to have them sweeping the NFC East because I truly think that they can win all of these games, especially because they're playing Washington football team at home. But I gave this game a 50-50 because, 1, I wanted to balance out the numbers with the 50-50 games, and 2, I don't want to seem like I'm being biased here. But I have them sweeping the rest of the NFC East. That's beating Philadelphia, New York, and Dallas. I truly believe they should win these games. Carolina will have a better coaching staff than these teams. They will arguably have a better roster. And if you look at the NFC East over the past couple of years, they've been the worst division of football. But we move on. I believe that they will beat the New York Jets. I think they will lose to the Buffalo Bills. I think they will go 50-50 with New England. And I'll explain to you why. 1, this game is at home in Carolina, so they already have home field advantage. 2, I don't know if Bill Belichick's roster is necessarily ready with the amount of talent to compete with the Panthers. And I think if they get into a shootout where Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore and Christian McCaffrey are just making explosive play after explosive play, that offense does not have enough weapons to keep up with Carolina. Then I think they will most likely lose to Miami, which is fair. And the last 2 games on this list, I have them going 50-50 with Minnesota, even though I do think they should win that game. I also have them going 50-50 with Arizona, which you may think I'm crazy. However, they did beat Arizona last year, miraculously. Arizona has not proven themselves to be a consistent football team yet. I don't really trust Cliff Kingsbury. So I'm going to take the 50-50 because they really could win that football game. Also, it's important to add, I have at the bottom of the screen here, that they do have a pending 17th game, and that is because of the new NFL. It's because the NFL is instating like that 17th game. I don't know if they're going to do that this season because of the pandemic and everything. However, if they do play Houston, they should win that game. I genuinely believe Houston will be the worst team in football next year, so they should beat Houston. So if you look at this estimated schedule right now, and you take the wins, losses, and you take half of the 50-50s and make half of the wins and half of them losses, they're going to have a 9-7, 10-6 record, depending on how these games go out. That's also not including the fact that they can beat some of these teams that they will most likely lose to. For example, they could shock the world and beat Tampa Bay next year. Tampa Bay had a tendency last season of falling asleep in big games, and quite honestly, I could see them falling asleep in one of these games against the Panthers, especially if they're playing them later on in the season, and Tampa Bay has already clinched a playoff spot. So that's a potential win for Carolina, and we might not have even saw it coming. Based off of these three factors, I truly believe that Carolina will make the playoffs next year. And if you still don't believe me, I have one more thing to add. They remind me a lot of a 5-11 team that I watched last year. And if you don't know who I'm talking about, it was a team in Miami that went 10-6 this season, and they just missed the playoffs by a very small margin. I'm not saying they're the same thing as Miami, but they remind me a lot of Miami. They fought the season before, they came out swinging, and they won a lot of games that they should have won. So if you're watching this video now and you're still not convinced, that's okay. But listen, when week 18 or 19 rolls around and Carolina's playing in Super Wildcard Weekend, I want you to remember this video. Thank you for watching.